1798, James Madison wrote to Thomas Jefferson, "The Constitution supposes what the history of all governments demonstrates, that the executive is the branch of power most interested in war, and most prone to it. It has accordingly and with studied care vested the question of war in the legislature." Madison's letter addresses the key fear of a monarchy by placing most of the war-making ability in the hands of Congress, but still providing the president with enough energy to take swift action.
Abraham Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus during the Civil War to preserve the Union was ruled illegal in the case Ex parte Merryman, because this power can only be suspended by Congress, not the president. But as Francis Biddle, Franklin Roosevelt's Attorney General, said, the Constitution has never greatly bothered any wartime president.
During emergencies, there is no time to wait for a gridlocked Congress to act, which forces the president to take executive action. President Franklin Roosevelt made 3,728 executive orders, including order number 6252, which created one of his signature programs, the Public Works Administration, to immediately start to fix the failing economy without spending a significant amount of time in Congress.
The media as well has allowed the presidential powers to significantly expand, because they can use the power of the bully pulpit to rally the people in order to communicate quickly and easily. President Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats were used to ease the minds of the people during the stressful times of the Great Depression while pushing his agenda. President Ronald Reagan's training as an actor earned him the nickname the Great Communicator for his ability to charm the press.
Due to the large media coverage of President George W. Bush shortly after the 9/11 attacks, his approval rating soared to 90%, allowing him to take executive action, which drastically expanded his powers of limited criticism. Today, President Barack Obama has used new sources of media, such as YouTube, Between Two Ferns, and late-night television to reach younger and less political audiences.
With the expansion of presidential power, the response by both the legislature and the judicial branch has been limited but also partisan. In 1919, the Senate failed to ratify the Treaty of Versailles, in part because President Woodrow Wilson did not invite Republicans to present his 14 points. This past September, Congress overrode President Obama's veto that would allow families of 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia over alleged support for the attacks. Congress's power to override is granted in Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution.
In the 1974 case, United States versus Nixon, the Supreme Court ruled that the president's right to safeguard certain information as an absolute executive privilege is not entirely immune from judicial review during criminal investigations. The Supreme Court limited presidential power in the 2006 case, Hamdan versus Rumsfeld, where President George W. Bush's military commissions order for Guantanamo Bay detainees was struck down because it went beyond the scope of the law.
President Washington summed up the power of the presidency in a letter to Alexander Hamilton. The powers of the executive are more definite and better understood perhaps than those of almost any other country, and my aim has been to neither stretch nor relax from them in any instance whatever, unless imperious circumstances should render the measure indispensable. Thank you.
Mr. Ware, you discussed how popularity has affected presidential power, and I'd like to ask all of you to expand on this, specifically how can public opinion affect presidential power? You don't have to answer. I just
One example would be during the Vietnam War, public opinion very much ruled what the president had to do, because since it was such an unpopular war, the president, Lyndon B. Johnson, eventually had to retrieve the troops from Vietnam.
And last year, when President Barack Obama was debating whether to put ground troops in Syria, the public opinion was so against it, he decided not to put them in.
Additionally, when President Franklin Roosevelt began to intern Japanese during World War II, public opinion wouldn't be technically for this internment of Japanese, but because he used the idea of fear, that the public accepted it. So he used the media to twist the minds of the people to accept something that typically would be seen as constitutional.
Great. Can you please compare the powers of the president and Congress in foreign affairs?
One power that the president has, he is considered the commander-in-chief as seen in Article 2, Section 2. His job as commander-in-chief is to say, I want to go to war with this country, this is my plan, but we see with Congress, they have the ability to check this and say yes or no, essentially.
To expand on my colleague's point, Congress also has the power to ratify treaties
those ambassadors or deny them altogether.
The president can also make trade agreements, as we can see, but the Congress must approve it. And we can see this in the Northern American Free Trade Agreement, where it opened borders between Canada and Mexico for us.
Also, under the War Powers Resolution, the president, although it's not strictly adhered to, the president also has to ask Congress for approval within 60 days or 90 days with an extension for movement of military troops.
So you all have spoken regarding as far as what the president can do, but how can Congress check the power of the presidency?
Congress has the power of the purse, so we see that they fund the wars. We've seen this in President George W. Bush's executive order declaring the heir over Afghanistan through an IRS law a war zone, and essentially this forced Congress to fund troops and therefore us be able to keep those troops in Afghanistan.
Another example is that Congress doesn't have to comply with whatever the president's legislative agenda is, which is very important. So this can be seen with President Franklin Roosevelt, who wanted to increase the number of Supreme Court justices, and even with President Barack Obama recently wanting to enact some major immigration reform, but it was his executive order ended up being struck down by the Supreme Court, U.S. versus Texas.
Prior to each executive order that the president makes, before it takes action, it is published for the public to see and for local courts, for state governments to also see and review. And they can challenge these executive orders in the federal courts and ultimately bring them up to the Supreme Courts. We can see in Clinton versus New York City that the executive order was limited.
And Congress can also override presidential vetoes given in Article 1, Section 7, and this has recently happened with President Barack Obama veto of the Saudi Arabia and Congress overriding it.
I want to go back to a bit of history, and I appreciate current examples balanced with historical. Why do you think the framers believe that an energetic executive is needed?
In Federalist 67, Alexander Hamilton writes that a energetic president is needed to make those